I'm going to read the book, We Elect a President, The Story of Our Electoral College by Tara Ross. So the author's daughter's name is Emma, so there are pages where there are explanations called Emma's Corner. And then there are also little sections called the Founder's Corner, which is intended to help those who want a jumping off point for more discussion or research. A lot of times it's quotes from famous people. George Washington was the first president of the United States. Did you ever wonder who decided that he would be president? Americans chose him. But we used our own very special method of choosing presidents. It's called the Electoral College. We've used this system to pick all our presidents. No other country has a process quite like ours. In some countries, everyone votes for president and the person who gets the most votes wins. Sometimes they have to hold more than one election because no one gets enough votes on the first try. In other countries, the heads of state are chosen by their version of Congress. In countries led by dictators, citizens may not get to vote for president at all. Some countries have kings instead of presidents. Americans have our very own system. We need something special because our country is so big and we have so many different states and regions. One special feature of our election process is that it happens in two parts. First, people vote in their states. That's what happens in November. Next, states get a turn to vote. Why did our founders, men like George Washington, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton, set it up this way? Isn't it kind of weird to let states vote? Wouldn't it be easier to hold one big national election among the people and leave the states out of it? Well, maybe it is a bit odd to let the states vote, but the founders had learned a lot from their experiences during the American Revolution. After all, they barely escaped from a British king who was really pushing Americans around. They knew they needed to create something different and unique. They did not want the new American government to be a bully, just like the king. Do you know why Americans fought the Revolution in the first place? A long time ago, America used to be part of Great Britain. Then the British government tried to tax us, even though we were all the way across the ocean. Americans had a pretty big problem with that. Why should the British government get to tax Americans? The people in America didn't get to vote for any of the leaders over there. Americans thought they should get to vote before anyone tried to tax them. Otherwise, the British government would turn into a big bully, treating British citizens in England, who could vote, better than the American colonists who couldn't vote. So, Emma's Corner. One day, my class was voting on what book to read. We had 4 choices, and I voted for Charlotte's Web. Fortunately, Charlotte's Web won. I am so glad the teacher let everyone have a say. What if the teacher had said something like, only people with blonde hair get to vote? Wouldn't that be unfair to everyone else when they all had to listen to the book chosen by only the blonde kids? So the Declaration of Independence starts like this. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and institute a new government. A lot of power in that document. Of course, the founders did more than just look to our own history in America. They also studied the history of other nations. They knew what had worked and what had not worked in other countries. They learned something. A democracy in which people simply vote for what they want doesn't always work. An old example explains why. Pretend that two wolves and a sheep decide to vote on what to have for dinner. Well, do you know what wolves eat? They eat sheep. The sheep will always lose that vote and be eaten for dinner, right? The founders knew that it is not enough just to let the people vote. A fair government will make sure that smaller groups of people, like the sheep, can protect themselves from bullies who could outvote them. Founders Corner. Perhaps the most important thing to understand about our Constitution is that the founders were not trying to create a pure or simple democracy. They wanted to be self-governing, of course. They had just fought a revolution, partly because they had no representation in Parliament. On the other hand, they knew their history. Pure democracies have a tendency to implode. The wolves are always tyrannizing the sheep. After they were done learning from history, the founders did one more thing. They remembered that people are not perfect. People make mistakes. Some people are bad. Some people don't mean to be bad, but when they are put in charge, they begin to think that it is really fun to boss people around. The new American government would need to protect everyone in case a very bad or very bossy person gets elected by accident. Emma's Corner. Have you noticed how some kids start being bossy as soon as the teacher leaves the room? And when the teacher comes back, they pretend that the rude, bossy behavior never happened. No one likes to be around a bully. Imagine that the Constitution is like the teacher. As long as it is around, it is harder for presidents and congressmen to be bullies. Our founders wanted to create something new that would keep all of these lessons in mind. First, the people should always be in charge of their own government. The government should never have any power except when the people decide that it's okay. Founders Corner. The founders wanted hurdles to stop, or at least slow down, irrational, bare, or emotional majorities. Minority political interests should be protected from the tyranny of the majority. The founders thus created a constitution that combines democracy, self-governance, with federalism, states acting on their own behalves, and republicanism, which encouraging deliberation and compromise. The various checks and balances in our Constitution protect our liberty. The opinion of the people should always matter. They should get to vote and have a say. The founders knew this was really important in a free country. On the other hand, the founders knew that a simple voting system would not be enough. They had to find a way to make things just a little more fair for small groups of voters. These small groups might still lose elections sometimes, but it shouldn't be so bad that they are like the sheep that gets eaten for dinner just because it lost a vote. The founders would use big phrases to describe this problem. How can they avoid the tyranny of the majority but still allow the people to be self-governing. With all these problems, it was also really hard to find a fair system for electing presidents. Our founders had lots of debates about it when they were writing our Constitution. Some people thought we should just hold one big national election for president, but that idea scared people from small states. They thought the big states would outvote them and get to choose the president all the time. The other people thought that we should let Congress pick the president. That seemed like a bad idea too, though. Wouldn't Congress just end up bossing the president around? And no one knew what Congress was going to look like anyway. For a long time, no one could agree on anything. The Founders' Corner. The most populous states, by combining in favor of the same individual, will be able to carry their points, says Charles Pinckney of South Carolina. He didn't want one big national election because small states would be ignored. I do not, gentlemen, trust you. If you possess the power, the abuse of it could not be checked. And what then would prevent you from exercising it to our destruction, says Gunning Bedford Jr. of Delaware. He was a small state delegate talking to large state delegates. He will be the mere creature of the legislature if appointed and impeachable by that body, Governor Morris of Pennsylvania. He did not want Congress to order the president around. The appointment of the executive should either be drawn from some source or held by some tenure that will give him a free agency with regard to the legislature, says James Madison of Virginia. If Congress can control the president, Madison added, then it would be dangerous to the public liberty. The founders were still arguing about how to elect a president when they got caught up in a completely different disagreement. What kind of Congress should we have? In other words, who gets to make laws in America? Everyone already agreed that Congress should not get to make all the laws. The states could make most laws by themselves. Congress would only make laws in certain areas of national interest. It was easy to agree on that part of it, but the states had more trouble agreeing on who gets to be in Congress. The small states wanted a Congress in which every state would get the same number of votes. They were still very worried that the big states would pass laws to hurt the small states. But the large states disagreed. Shouldn't Virginia get more votes than tiny Delaware? Fortunately, the founders worked out a compromise. They decided Congress would be split in half. One part, the Senate, would be exactly like the small states wanted. The other part, the House of Representatives, would be exactly like the big states wanted. Congress can make laws only when the Senate and House agree. Then the founders had another idea. If Congress could be half like the big states wanted and half like the small states wanted, couldn't the same thing work for choosing presidents? Yes, it could. And that's exactly what they decided to do. But how exactly did they make that work? It turned out to be easier than you might think, but the founders knew they would have to create something new and unique. They could not simply hold one big national election among all the people. The states would need a turn too. Emma's Corner. Pretend you are running a lemonade stand with your friend. You want each glass to cost $1. Your friend wants each glass to cost 50 cents. The two of you simply can't agree. Finally, you realize that you can compromise. Each glass will cost 75 cents. We call the election system that they created the Electoral College. Isn't that kind of a funny name? It sounds like it should be a school or university, but it's not. It's just the name we use for our special way of electing presidents. Our special way of electing presidents has two parts. First, each state must decide which presidential candidate it likes best. Do you know how the states make this decision? Easy. States ask their citizens to vote. On Election Day in November, individual people vote. They are telling their state which candidate they like best. The candidate who wins the most votes in a state gets to be the choice of that state. After that, each state asks a few people, called electors, to help with the second part of the election. These electors have already promised to vote for the person that their state wants. In December, a new election is held. In this election, electors cast votes for their states. The December election is the one that decides who gets to be president. A president is elected if a majority of electors vote for him or her. That means he or she needs 270 votes because there are 538 electors. George Washington was the choice of all the states in 1789. Emma's Corner. In 2012, I watched my mom vote in Texas. I learned something cool. Did you know that your mom or dad isn't really voting for the presidential candidate? I thought my mom was voting for Mitt Romney or Barack Obama, but she wasn't. It turns out that she was voting for regular Texans. If the Republican Texans got the most votes, Texans would vote for Romney. If the Democratic Texans got the most votes, Texans would vote for Obama. Perhaps you won't be surprised to hear that big states get more electors than small states. They have more people, but small states always get at least 3 electors, no matter what. This helps the small states just a little. The founders were hoping it would be just enough to keep them from being like the sheep who keeps getting outvoted by the wolves. What state do you live in? Do you know how many electors your state has? I live in Texas, and my state has 38 electors. How did Texas get 38 votes and not some other number? Because Texas has 36 congressmen and 2 senators. Every state has the same number of electors as they do members of the House and Senate. Here's Arizona with 11. That means we have 9 representatives in the House and 2 senators. Every once in a while, presidents are elected because they got the most electors to vote for them in December, even though they did not get the most individual people to vote for them in November. You might hear people say, "But that's not fair. Shouldn't the person who with the most votes win?" Actually, it is fair. But it helps if we remember some of the good things that happened today because of the Electoral College. And it helps if we remember what a big, diverse place America is. Our country is full of so many different kinds of people, and our states are all sorts of different sizes. One day, my mom told me to get in the car so we could run an errand, but I wanted to stay home and read. I was almost done with my book. I protested, but my mom made me hop in the car. I was disappointed and grumbled about how unfair she was being. Suddenly, the car stopped. I looked up. Then I saw why she had brought me along. My mom had arranged a surprise sleepover with my best friend. I smiled and skipped inside. My mom's actions felt unfair, but once I understood what she was doing, I realized that it really wasn't unfair at all. Think about it. Some people live in big cities, while others live in small cities. Some people are teachers, but others work in coal mines or on farms. Some people are Christians, others are Jews or Muslims. What if a person could get elected president by getting all the people in big cities to vote for him? Wouldn't the people in small cities be worried that they were going to get eaten like the sheep? Or what if a person could get elected president by getting doctors and lawyers to gang up on teachers and farmers? Would that be fair to the teachers and farmers? The Electoral College is the fairest system for our country because it makes presidential candidates think about lots of different kinds of people in lots of different states. When candidates forget this and focus too much on only one kind of voter, they always lose. They might get a lot of votes in one part of the country and win the November vote among individuals, but they won't have enough states to win the December vote among electors. Emma's Corner. Pretend your school is electing a student body president. One candidate is from the 6th grade and one is from the 8th grade. There's just one problem. The 8th grade has 200 students. The 6th and 7th grades have less, only 180 people total. Now imagine that the 8th grader makes a big promise. If he wins, he will make sure that the 8th grade is always first in the lunch line. The entire 8th grade votes for him, but no one else does. He wins 200 to 180. The 6th and 7th graders think the election is pretty unfair. Why can the 8th grader be so mean to the 6th and 7th grades and win anyway? Fortunately, no state can ever be like the 8th grade when we elect a president. The Electoral College doesn't let that happen. The Electoral College protects the small states and the less populated areas of the country, but it does something else too. It encourages Americans to work together. In order to win the Electoral College vote, a presidential candidate must remember the things that bring us together as Americans, rather than focusing on the areas where we disagree or are upset. What solutions work for the most people at the same time? What encourages Americans to remember our common history and our common values? If presidential candidates want to win many states all at the same time, then they need to figure out the answers to these questions. If we take time to see what has happened in the past, we discover that presidential candidates are most successful when they help people to get along. They do poorly when they make some groups of people really mad at other groups. Emma's Corner. Pretend that you need to make a banner for your school's volleyball team. You know exactly what you want to draw, and you have the colors all picked out. The banner is really big, though. You need help. You ask your friends, but they say no. They don't like your colors or the way you want to draw volleyballs. At first, you get really upset. Why won't anyone help? Finally, you decide to ask again. This time you say, why don't you draw the volleyballs your way and I'll pick the spot to hang the banner? We'll use colors we both like. Your friends like this idea better and finally say yes. Soon, everyone is pitching in to help. The Electoral College once worked to unify the country when Americans really did not want to be together. After the Civil War, the Electoral College was one factor that forced North and South to start working together again. Why? The Democrats were strongest in the South, and they could not win unless they figured out how to get some votes from the more Republican states in the North. In the same way, Republicans had to figure out how to compete with the Democrats. If the Democrats took even some of their voters, they would lose the election. In the end, Democrat Grover Cleveland finally figured out how to earn the trust of some Northerners, and he was elected in 1884. The Electoral College has one more benefit that might surprise you. It helps to stop bad guys from stealing elections. Did you know that an election can be stolen? Elections are stolen when bad guys pretend to be someone else and vote for them. Or sometimes bad guys take people's votes and hide them so they can't get counted. Don't you wish that someone could wave a magic wand and turn a bad guy into a good guy? In real life, no one has that kind of magic wand. But the Electoral College does the next best thing. It makes it harder for the bad guys to get away with their bad behavior. This only works because both people and states get a turn to vote. What good does it do to steal people's votes unless you know where to steal them? Because of the Electoral College, the bad guys have to know in advance which state might have a close outcome. Then they have to figure out how to steal votes in that one state. If the bad guys know where to steal votes, then the good guys probably do too. They will work hard to stop the bad guys. Without the Electoral College, this wouldn't work. The bad guys would steal votes anywhere. In fact, they would just pick the place where it is easiest to be bad, and they would steal as many votes as they could to win in that city or state. Emma's Corner. Have you ever been on an Easter egg hunt? Pretend that you are looking for Easter eggs in your house. Dozens of eggs are hidden in each room. No matter where you go, there's an egg to be found. You find a bunch of eggs very fast. Now, imagine a different Easter egg hunt. Fewer eggs are hidden, and they are all only in one room. You don't know which room has the eggs. By the time you figure it out, your brother and sister have figured it out too. But they are taking eggs before you can find them. It takes longer to find the eggs, and you don't get as many. Isn't it a lot easier to find the eggs when you know there will be many eggs in every room, like every state, votes in every state, rather than smaller numbers of eggs in only one room? The idea for our Electoral College was completely new. Our founders were looking for something that would let the majority rule, but that would also make sure that bullies weren't always voting to eat the sheep. America is a huge country, and the president is the only person who is expected to represent people in every state and every city. We have many states, many regions, many industries, and many religious beliefs, but everyone should have a choice when it is time to pick our president. Founders Corner. The mode of appointment of the Chief Magistrate of the United States is almost the only part of the system which has escaped without severe censure. I venture somewhat further and hesitate not to affirm that if the manner of it be not perfect, it is at least excellent, says Alexander Hamilton, who helped write the Constitution. The founders felt that they had accomplished all these goals, and they were very proud of the excellent presidential election process that they created. The Electoral College has served America well for many years. We can be just as proud of it as our founders were. Here's glossary of words. The end.